This is Nathan Krusko. He's a good friend of ours here, and he's a professional ice fisherman, and he's got his Northeast Ice program going, and he does an e-magazine interview live type of thing, so you can check him out on the internet. He's got all kinds of neat stuff. Very involved in the ice fishing industry, and he's pretty interesting to listen to, and he actually knows more than most of us, so good job.
Well, thank you very much for the interview.
There you go. There's an excellent introduction
that.
there. Okay. This is Nathan Krusko. Enjoy his program here. It's really good.
Yes, I'm Nathan Krusko of Northeast Ice Fishing. I host a talk show called Northeast Ice Fishing. It's a podcast. It's hosted on iTunes, Northeast Ice Fishing website, any of your other MP3 feed burner sources you can find. So if you guys are on the computer all the time as much as I am, or even just a little bit, we're on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, all social media pages. If there's a way that you want to find ice fishing, I'm probably there hanging out. What I'm here for today is talk to you guys a little bit about deep water perching. A lot of guys in fishing deep water or in fishing perch in Lake George think, I gotta go heavy, I gotta go get a big spoon. Gotta use a Swedish pimple or a Haley or a Kodiak or a big Northland and a couple flies on top of it, right? Is that how everybody fishes Lake George? Big weight on bottom, couple flies on top. Well, I'm not here to reinvent the wheel or break the mold a little bit, but I want to break the cycle. I want to help you guys get over those days where you say the fish aren't biting or they're biting too light and I can't catch them. There's reasons why you're not catching them. There's reasons why you're not hooking them because you feel that they're biting too light. And I'm going to help you overcome some of those reasons. We're going to start out with the very beginning. Rod selection. How many people here use ultralight rods? How many people here paid attention to the action at the tip of their rod, or how sensitive that rod is when you were selecting it? You poured over the detail on how much that thing bent, right? It's the most important thing when you're out there fishing. If you fish with a rod that's too stiff, that's not going to load up with the jig that you're using, you're probably the first one that's going to say, well, I'm not using those small jigs because I can't feel them on my fishing pole. They don't work. That is partially true. You're not going to feel them. But as it's further compounded by another issue, your line weight. A lot of people are out there using 4-pound line in the wintertime. That is only going to hurt you as well. Try downgrading to lighter rods, lighter line. I mentioned to you, you say, well, you know, I can't feel them. You know, my rod's just not heavy enough for them. I'm using little tiny jigs. This little guy here, if I can get it on there. 35 feet of water on Lake George. There's one depth I'm going to tell you on that lake is 35 feet. I don't care if you leave here today and don't remember a single thing I told you. Remember 35 feet of water. That's your place you got to be fishing on that lake. The other thing is, I want you to start using fishing poles that are going to help you feel that jig. When you're up there picking out a rod, go find the jigs that you might be using, hang it from the end of the fishing pole, and look for that tip to bend slightly. As you know, you've now matched your jig with the fishing pole you're using, because you want to see that load up just a little bit to help give you that presentation. Step into a smaller line. You know, so once we got you a good light rod, a good light line, 2-pound line, then we're going to get out of breaking the mold. Most common thing on Lake George is using a dropper, a Haley, a Northland, a Kodiak, a couple flies on top because it's heavy, we can get down there fast, we can get to the fish right away. That's great. You can get down to the fish fast. But you're not solving everything yet. You're getting down there fast, but what if they're not interested in your big heavy offering or big flash spoon? The big offerings are great. You know, there's days where using a little spoon like this is outstanding. There's days But going for a bigger, heavier spoon like this is outstanding as well. More times than not, how many people are out there fishing with a spoon like this all the time? Probably a lot of guys are fishing with a spoon this big. Try downgrading. You're fishing with something like that, using a couple dropper flies probably. But the thing is if you're going light jigs, light poles, light line, it might take you a few more seconds to get down there, as opposed to using this big heavy thing where you could drop it down like a boat anchor, you know, get down there right to the fish right away and right to business. It's only going to take a few more seconds longer. And if you're fishing deep water, you might have to take a couple seconds and feed the line down the hole. But when you get down there, you're going to be rewarded by catching those fish that aren't hitting that day. They aren't on that heavy feed, the extremely active feed. Or on days, I had a gentleman here that I met a couple years ago fishing Harris Bay. He said, geez, you helped change my fishing life. It was 11 o'clock in the morning, everybody's off the lake by then. There's myself and maybe 2 or 3 people out there fishing. All the guys walked off and said, oh, the fish aren't biting, they're not hitting today. Well, usually if I fish that lake, I sleep in. I don't get out there till 10 o'clock in the morning. So I'm passing all the guys that are going in, and I'm going out. I'm waiting to go out to get onto those fish that the other guys are walking away from. Because I'm using lighter tactics, lighter techniques. I'm using smaller presentations. And I'm finessing these fish up. If I'm out there locating, using a spoon like this isn't bad. That's probably the biggest I'll actually go to if I'm out on that lake. Because I like to catch more fish than just the most aggressive fish. When I'm out there, I'm using these little guys. These are the Northland series, bro bugs. And then the Northland Muskas right here are a little tungsten jig. Some of you guys in the back probably can't see this. Some of you think, geez, that's so small, I can't catch fish on that. You can catch fish on jigs much smaller than that. When you're fishing a jig like that, the reason why you go so small is because you're providing subtle changes. You know, you're not doing the classic thing. I love seeing this on Lake George. The browbeating fish, you know, you do like this, you're bouncing, then drop back down, then do that, then drop back down. I see times like that, and the guy's just standing there, just doing this for hours. I'll be trying, you know, work out, get a good workout, get his arms strong, built up or something. But that's what you're doing sometimes, and I see guys like that just doing that all day long and then not catch anything. You know, fish will come over to it, they see it, all of a sudden the thing's 3 feet above his head, and he's like, well, where'd it go? Well, you scare him off, whatever. The most common technique for me is sitting nice and steady. You know? If I'm jigging perch out there, I'm using these little presentations, I might be wiggling like this, and I'm shaking a lot right now because of coffee, but I basically shake like this when I'm fishing too. I might move up and down just like this, ever so subtle. So once I've lowered that little presentation down there, I'm trying to get them to swing by and say, that thing just vibrating just ever so slightly. What is that? There's not a single freshwater invertebrate in that lake that jumps, that can instantaneously propel itself 3 feet up and then drop back down. No freshwater shrimp in that lake does it. They undulate. They vibrate ever so slightly up and they move down. Try and match what they're looking for. Give them something natural. Give them something that they're comfortable with. You're trying to trick them into attaching your bait. You're not trying to beat them into submission and get them to give up, because they're not giving up in your presentation. You know, when you're doing that heavy arm lift and you're doing these things, you're just catching the most aggressive fish, and at that point they'll hit darn near anything that you drop down. In some cases a bare hook. I want you to get out there and experience these bites where you can sleep in the morning and don't worry about that famed, oh, gotta get out there at 6 o'clock in the morning for the morning bite. Stop by Stewart's, have a cup of coffee, have breakfast. Wait till 10, 11 o'clock in the morning when you can get a parking space. Because how many times you guys got out to the lake at 9 o'clock in the morning and now you can't find a parking spot, right? That's why you get out there right away. Wait till 10 o'clock. All the guys will be passing you going one way and you're headed out to the lake to go out and catch your limit of fish. Because you're doing the subtle little things. step away from that traditional using 2 or 3 presentations. Get down to just using one lure. Suffice with the fact that I'm going to use just one lure and I'm going to finesse every single fish that I catch. I'm going to earn every single fish that comes up to me. There's these ones here, you're going to probably tip down with a single wax worm right through the head. And wax worm, like a little grub like this, just a single one. Try using just a single spike, right through the middle, right through the end, something to just give a little wiggle on there. So when you do hold it right still, it gives them a little scent, a little smell, something to really hone in on. The other thing that you have to consider though, is how many people have heard of line spin, jig spin? Yeah. It's because your line has memory, right? Drop it down, it's got coil. And when using little presentations like this, in deep water, it just magnifies that issue. You know, you get 35 feet of line out, and now you got a whole lot of line for all that memory to come undone in, right? So don't just do a little jigging and then just drop, you know, set it down and dead stick it. Because once you dead stick it, that line sits inactive, that gives that time to unwind. So by always keeping it moving, keeping it steady, and I'm not telling you to move it up and down all the time, but you see like I'm moving right now, you guys are sitting in front. You see my coffee shakes here, it's going phenomenal. Just keep it moving like that. You know, that little subtle movement is going to keep that jig from wanting to go back to unwind this way, because as you're moving it up, you're trying to get it to wind up. So you're always getting it to flutter back and forth. That'll help you keep from untwisting it and scaring the fish off.
I have a question.
Yes.
Now, if you're fishing without electronics, like down at 35 feet, and you have that light of line, I mean, I understand. I use light. I agree with you. But I have electronics which tells me where the bottom of the lake is or whatever it is. If you don't have that, you could be pulling out line and line and line, and you say to yourself, well, I wonder if I'm down the bottom yet. With a heavier lure, like, you know, you try to urge everybody not to use that. That's the way you could tell when you let that heavier lure, it'll go down to the bottom. Then you know you're at the bottom.
Poor man's line counter.
Huh?
Poor man's line counter. You drop down a weight on that jig, then you reel it up. You count turns. Every turn is so many feet.
Yeah.
And you count turns. So if you're worried about not getting down there and not knowing the right depth when using sonar, and I'm glad you asked that question, because not everybody uses sonar, and this technique is great when you're using sonar, but if you're not, that's where that technique comes in.
Right.
The fact that now you drop down at a sounder weight, you reeled it up, you know it counts 20 turns. So when you're dropping it back down again, just back reel it down. Let that drag. 1, 2,
I mean, if you use that them light lures and everything, you're going to have to help that thing down that water.
Not much.
Well,
Once you get your line,
'cause I use them little leg jigs, and you know, I've seen people, and they say, well, gee, how you get it out? And they're pulling it. Next thing, they got a mess.
Yeah.
You know, they pull the bail off, and you know.
One thing's going to help you. A couple things are going to help you. Going to light line.
Well, I swear by it.
You know, some of the guys might be running into issues like that or running a heavier line. The other thing is you're holding it out like this. Point to the hole, allowing the line to drop straight down through. The other thing is get your tip just above the water. So if you're fishing outside of a shelter and you're sitting on a bucket, you got the darn wind counteracting, you know. So the farther away from the hole you get the wind pushing your line. That little 2-pound line doesn't take much wind to move that. Get away from there. You know, not everybody has the use of sonar. Not everybody has the use of a shelter. But we all have the ability to take our fishing pole and get it right to the tip of the surface. And now you're able to backfeed that down. And that's a very good question you brought that up, because I've had this happen to myself years ago when I first learned that poor man sonar technique. Before I even had sonar, I knew that 35 feet was the depth of fish at lake. When I was religious, I was always back counting. Always, always, always. Even if I was using some of these smaller Northland spoons, I was still back counting to make sure I got to the right depth. Because I knew what depth I was at. Because a lot of times I would just drop it down and then I'd be jigging along and feel like I have a hit. Well, I did. I got into a pocket of the grass. I think I'm getting a hit, but I'm not. I caught a piece of grass, and I'm jigging down there with a piece of grass unknown to me. Because I go set the hook. How many people have done that? You think you have a hit, and you pull up a piece of grass 5 minutes later. So that back spooling will help you out even if you are using your heavier presentations. The other thing is, you're out there doing that, and you're moving, but when we're fishing those deep waters and we're using these light presentations, you got to stay mobile. You know, don't just poke a couple holes and hang out there. If they're not there, they're not there. Get mobile. There's a gentleman in this room today who was out on Harris Bay with me. The whole crowd left because they weren't catching anything. We were maybe 12 feet apart.
Yeah.
He wasn't catching anything. I was catching fish. I invited him over. His hole didn't have anything. My hole had fish. Don't hesitate to move just a couple feet. Change his fishing life. Just moving a couple feet. It's only another couple turns of the auger, and if you're using a power auger, it's just squeezing a throttle and go. Color selections in Lake George is a great one. Low light conditions, I like something that has a bit of a white glow. If I was to tell you one color and one color only for Lake George, it'd be like a greenish perch color or something with a yellowish tinge. All the jigs I have up here and all the colors I have up here are all solid winners of the lake. Some that I've used over the years were so productive that the colors are beating off them. But go those greens, yellows, maybe some of the lighter whites. Stick with those color patterns. You can't go wrong in that lake as well. Soft plastics. A lot of guys are getting into the use of soft plastics. Jeff has some great soft plastics upstairs. They'll help you out in the days where just a mousey or just a waxworm is not working. When I go out and go fishing in a tournament situation, I go out with waxworms, I go out there with mousies, I go out there with spikes, I go out there with minnows, and I take out plastics. One of those five is going to catch fish. So if I feel the fish aren't biting today, well, maybe they weren't biting. Correct, they weren't biting on the waxworms. Maybe they're biting on the spikes. Maybe they're biting on the plastics. But one way, I'm going to find one of the five things that they're biting on. Yes, there are days when they're not biting, but those days are few and far between. They just might not be biting on your presentation. Don't be set in your ways of, I'm just going to use this one color and this one lure and that's it. Try switching it up. Try switching the offering on that lure. We all have favorite lures. We all have the one that's like a cherished go-to. Keep that as your go-to. But don't be afraid to dip into that $200 jig selection that you have and find something different. Find something out of the ordinary. Because you didn't spend all the money on those jigs to decorate your box. You bought them to catch fish. Step out of the mold, try something different. But at least downgrade your size. Don't be afraid to get out of your ways and try something different. Just get out of that mold. Any questions so far? The other thing at Lake George, we got the jigs, we got the depth. Look for contours. How many people know how to read a contour map? Look for funnels. A funnel is where all the deep water goes up and points to a shallow area, right? There's a spot where one of us in here, another one of us in here fishes, where it comes out of 60 feet of water, contour funnels up, right in the middle of that right here. It's a 35-foot spot, right in the center of that V. You go 30 yards one way, 30 yards the other, not so much. But you get right in the center of that funnel point, you stay right on that. Lake George also has some nice humps. There's one hump that I know of comes up out of, I think, 180 feet. The top of it's about 38, 32 feet. It's a big drastic change, but the top of that hump is a lot of grass. And that grass catches roaming perch that happen to be scooting by coming out of different parts of the lake. Sawmill Bay and Huddle Bay and Harris Bay, they're all pretty uniform. The fact that you're getting your 20s, you get your 30s, but when you go look at the contour map, always look for a 35-foot depth, but look for that funnel. Look for a pinch point like a curve in a contour line. So let's say in Harris Bay, for example, all the contours are pointing. It's a big wide arc, Look for like a sharp change within that arc somewheres. Look for like a 35 line. That's another thing. Just look for a big drastic change, but also look for that depth. I'm not saying that there's depths in the lake where you're not going to catch fish at. I mean, yes, there are times when I go to, I don't even know the name of the bay. It's up by Sagamore. I've been in like 20 feet of water there and I caught perch. But not with the success and the consistency I did if I just went out just a little bit deeper. Perch in that lake are all scattered, but there are larger numbers of fish in that 35-foot range. And Jeff's got a nice map upstairs. He sells some nice maps of the lake. The map of that lake is very, very accurate. I use GPS and chart plotters. We have a chart plotter on our ATVs, and I use a handheld GPS with a lake mapping chip in it. And they match up pretty good to those maps that he has upstairs. So even if you were to take your hunting GPS and triangulate the coordinates off that map up there, you'll be able to get to that spot just as well. And it works like a charm. Before I used lake mapping chips and before I used chart plotters on our ATVs, I used my hunting GPS and I think, all right, well, 32 north or whatever, and pick that one. It pretty much got you almost on the money. So that's a way to put technology to your advantage.
Is there any GPS out there that you can draw that information off the internet rather than buying the chip?
No.
Okay.
Navionics chips for that lake are deadly accurate also.
Yeah, I got the info up there on that.
Yeah, the
I
Navionics
like
chip is
that where you
amazing.
just buy the map. That's kind of like the poor man way. If you got a GPS, you buy the
Yep.
map, punch in the coordinates, and then you can locate where you want those peaks or where you're talking about.
Exactly. And the other thing is handheld units. They make a handheld unit for hunting, for your car, and for fishing. There's a unit made that you can put the lake chip in, use it for fishing. You can use it in the woods. You can plug in restaurants, all on a simple handheld unit.
Yeah.
And they're handy as well.
Yeah.
So there's all options out there for everybody's budget. Not everybody's going to go out and spend thousands of dollars on gear,
Yeah.
but there's different techniques for all of us. Or when in doubt, look for the crowd and count the depths. Well, this crowd's fishing 25 feet of water. Well, I got to go a little bit further. Try that as well. Any other questions?
I got one. You don't ever just drop flies with some spikes on them?
No, I stopped using flies 4 years ago, and I just use a single lure, single presentation. It doesn't take me, what, hour and a half, maybe?
Yeah, maybe even that.
Hour and a half to catch a limit of 50 fish. Just single jig. Catching doubles were fun. I used to really enjoy catching doubles. But I'm doing just the same efficiency, if not better, using just a single jig presentation. And the flies are really good. I mean, some of the flies up there, like the green fly, is amazing. It's better than the black one. If I was to go to a fly, and even some of these heavier jigs, like if you do want to go to a fly, try downgrading the size of this and put your fly up there. It'll take a little bit longer because of the resistance of the fly getting down there, but you're going to be just as effective. And they're great. And that fly, those flies are such a unique thing for Lake George. I've tried that on other lakes and it just doesn't work half as good. For some reason, they just love those flies in Lake George because of that. They're imitating the movement of that shrimp.
Do you use swivels on your jigs? When you're...
Swivels will help you, but you need to keep that a good 2 feet away from your lure. Yeah. But for myself, I'm always moving so much that I'm always conscious of that counter spin. If you guys are concerned about that counter spin, that's where the use of swivels is going to help you out. Go 2 feet up, get it out of the equation, get it out of the fish's peripherals, a nice big green shiny object. They might go after that. Try and keep it out of the realm, 2 or 3 feet away. That'll help you out some, that's for sure. But I just don't, personally, I like direct connection. I'm controlled in everything I do, and I like to have full control over everything. And that little swivel for my own personal fishing technique imparts a level of control that I don't have any control over what's happening in that bottom 2 feet. when I use that. Any other questions?
Well, one thing that you taught me on the ice is I was so used to when you feel the tap, you just set that hook, you slam it, and then you taught me how to just either subtle bite or even with the electronics, you can see the fish moving in. Just drop your rod tip and start reeling. That was a very fascinating, and it really put a lot of fish on the ice for me.
Yeah, that's bow to your fish. I call it bow to your gills. I taught that to you and
Yep.
you and a couple other people. How many guys have like been out there fishing and you find like, geez, they're hitting, but I can't hook them because you know as soon as you feel a tap, you do the shack slapper or the Bassmaster's hook set. With bluegill, this is a very common thing. That's why I always talk about it in all my bluegill presentations. Is the fact that a bluegill will grab a jig, and when they first grab it, they'll hold it between their lips. At that point, when you feel that little nudge, that's when you yarn it and just rip it right out of his face, and you're missing him. So take a 2-second pause, and then those days when you're not hooking up with a fish, like if it's a really negative perch bite and they're just like barely grabbing it, take 2 seconds and thank you, and set the hook. Just drop the tip long enough to say thank you. You don't have to say it out loud, think about it, consciously pause, you know, so they don't look like some guys in a shelter just talking to himself all day long. I mean, your buddies might wonder, what are you doing over there?
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thanks again. So, you know, maybe mentally do it, but it's a 2-second pause. It allows them
Thank you very much.
to do the second part of what they're doing. They're grabbing it. Okay, I think I'm gonna go for this. They open their mouth, inhale it, shut their mouth, set the hook. If anybody's using underwater camera, you definitely know this. If anybody sight fishes, you've seen this. This winter I plan on publishing some videos demonstrating this because it's a common thing that a lot of guys overlook. So follow us. I should have a 7-part video series coming out probably February or March, and we're going to be demonstrating that. One key factor is the fact that you're setting the hook when they're tasting the jig, you know. But that's a great point. Glad you asked that or pointed that out as well.
It really did. It changed a lot of my fishing techniques and put a lot more fish in my bucket.
Yeah.
A lot more fish.
Any
One
other
question I
Yeah.
have is, I listened to you last year, I really enjoyed it. You have a very good presentation. But I was the old fashioned guy. I took the pole, put it up here, and of course I used to do that. You told me not to do that anymore. So last year, I did what you told me, and you told me how to hold the rod like what you're doing now.
Yeah.
And I've been very successful, and I remember that. Thank you. And anyway, it's really helped me. I put more fish on them.
Have you got away from verbally saying it?
Well,
It's more of a mental thing now?
my son and I, and I always, he must have caught one. He said, "Thank you." And I've outfished him many times, so I mean, but it's really helped me the way you hold it. You know, I figured I would never be able to learn how to hold that. Yeah, that's the way I used to go.
That's a classic thing. All your
Yeah.
movements in your wrists.
But now I hold it like you.
Yeah.
Put it on.
All of your movements in multiple movement points. All of your jiggings in multiple movement points.
And I think
Or
that's
you're
a
doing
great
this,
way.
well now you got the wrist moving, you got the elbow moving, you got the shoulder moving. All you have is just a slight twist
And
of
you
your
can
arm.
see the fish bite so much easier.
Yep. That's all you
Of
have,
course,
just
I
a
went the
slight
whole
twist.
like gear.
Yeah.
2-pound test on everything.
Yeah.
And I've lost some jigs. I mean, up here at Lake George on it. But I figured I caught something bigger.
Yeah.
You know, maybe-
Probably did. But
yeah, like a Laker or something like that or something.
But that's my go-to jigging technique is just holding it like this. I mean, it looks so odd, doesn't it? It takes
Yeah.
away everything. It's you're programmed to do. I get hold a fishing pole like this, 2 fingers here, 2 fingers here, thumb up here. Okay, this is how you hold a fishing pole. It looks odd. Geez, I can't reel because I mean, how do you reel? Your palm's gonna hit the thing. Now you're holding it like this. One movement, like that. These fingers curl out of the way. Base of the reel is up against your wrist, so your thumb, and you're reeling, landing fish. It's not unnatural after you do it a while. And if anybody here is a Bills fan, when you're home watching the Bills get crushed, Sit on your couch with a fishing pole and just. This didn't go over very well in Tonawanda last week, by the way.
It's the truth, though.
I probably won't say that out there again. So when you're sitting there watching the game, just hold your fishing pole and do that once in a while, you know? Do that quick hook set, you know? Simple little things like that will help put more fish on the ice.
How's that 2-pound line if you're getting nabbed by a Laker?
2-pound line in a Laker is rough.
It is tough, yeah.
I think I'd ever get through.
Just play it out.
Yep.
Take the 20 minutes, take the 30 minutes, because you don't want to lose that jig.
That's right.
Trust me on that one.
Yeah, play it out, work it out, and if you land it, you did pretty good.
I did.
Myself, I mean, I got enough jigs. I mean, if I get into a situation like that and I'm competing, I snap it off and go back to business. So if anybody catches the Lakers got jigging it, I want my jig back. So, yes.
Nathan, there's a lot of different brand names of the fluorocarbons and all different kinds of ice line out there, and it seems like every company is in the marketplace now. Do you find that there's one in particular that you really like for the real light line, like the 2-pound and the 4-pound? Like, is there something you really, really have found that you like a lot?
For line selection, I don't have one I like a lot yet. The reason being because I'm always buying the newest, latest, greatest, and I'm yet to find one I truly like. But irregardless of the brand of line I'm using, I always do the same thing I do when I'm fly fishing, is I stretch my line. When I get to the ice, my first drop, I take the line between my fingers, drop it, fingers, drop. I'm taking that stretch, taking that memory out of my line from sitting on the reel all week long before I went out and used it. But unfortunately at this point I don't have a specific recommendation. As far as line type, I do plan on interviewing some of the manufacturers and we're going to hash it out what's better and what's not. But for good starters, 2-pound, forget the brand, 2-pound mono, stay away from Firewire. I know that. I don't like stranded line personally.
Braided line you're talking?
Yes.
Do you know how small braided line goes down to for freshwater fish? I mean,
You can get like 2 or 3 pound range, I think, something like that.
and you don't like the braided line?
No.
Is the reason why?
I just like mono. Braided line will hold water, hold moisture.
And that's the problem why?
It'll freeze on your reel.
I've got a question about line. You brought it up, it was a good question. How often do you change your line off your reel? I mean,
Every single year.
Every single year? Okay. I know some guys will do it every week or...
Every year, a couple times a year. I do it a lot, the average person. Make sure you have new line on at the start of the year. Your line is the only connection between you and the fish. If you run an old line, well, forget the fish. The other thing is, if you're using multiple fishing poles and you want to save yourself a little bit, you'll never use 100 yards of fishing line in your jigging applications. Not unless you hook a fish like a Laker and he's gone forever. Take a little Teflon tape, wrap it on your reel, plumber's tape. Or take some of your junk 6-pound mono from the summertime, wrap it on there, tie a blood knot on, put on your 2-pound line, go 40 yards, maybe 30 yards. You're not going to need a lot. So just have your 2 foot at the very end of that. So at least use a backer of it. That's another one. Over here?
I was just going to comment that I use a fire line, but I use about a 5-foot leader.
Yep.
And tie a line to line, so I don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have to mess with the swivel.
Yep.
But that's been working. I haven't had any freezing problems.
Fireline is a braided
Yes.
that you're talking?
Any particular knots you use over others?
I used a improved trialing knot. I've been using that since I learned how to tie a fishing knot. For me, I haven't lost, well, I don't know if I've lost a fish as a result of the knot. It works for me. It's something I can do real easy and do it in the cold. So I'm not changing my knot style.
If you were going to use flies, what would your total setup be?
In using flies, between the bottom lure, your flasher lure, and your first fly, you're talking maybe 9 inches. I go another foot to 16 above that.
And that bottom one, would you, like, let's say it was a Haley, would you just take that hook off?
No, I put a wax from or live bait on it. I mean, if you got it down there, you might as well make it. You do something.
And how far would you have it out live from the main line?
I tied all my flies right to the main line.
Right to the main.
Right to, yeah. The reason being, that little dropper, that detaches you from your main line.
Right.
That has play up and down, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, now it's removing me from the fish. The fish is moving that up and down. If you're not paying attention or your rod is not the right rod, you don't know what's going on with that thing. You could be poking at it and moving it. You have no idea. But right to the main line works just fine. Yeah. I've never done the like the Lake George rig where you got a couple of whips hanging off.
Right.
Always right to the main line. Like I said, I'm a control freak. Everything when I'm fishing is controlled. I'm in a shelter. I've got rid of the wind. I got rid of the cold. Everything I do is all heavily controlled. So all direct line to me. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, you guys, for coming. I hope you get out on Lake George this year. I hope you get out to start using some flashers, using sonar to help improve your success. I've heard some great stories of people using sonar and it helped with their success. If you don't currently own one, find a guy out there that's fishing. Ask him if he doesn't mind showing you how to use it. And you might be pleasantly surprised at how much your fishing career is going to change.
Cheating.
And if you have children, have the guy show your son or daughter first.
There you go.
And then he'll show you. I had a father and son in Harris Bay last year.
You know more than
I taught the kid,
kids today.
all right, that little line, that's the fish. That little line, that's your lure. Do what you have to make those two lines meet. That's all I told the little boy. He was doing everything. I said, all right, well, they meet. He said, well, what do I do when they meet? Pay attention to your fishing pole. I said, why? Because they're going to bite. Well, that little kid had it mastered. So him fishing 15 minutes, his father fishing 15 minutes, he caught more fish than his father did.
No.
But he had years of video game practice over his father. But as a fishing community, we're all very friendly. We're all willing to help each other out. I'm sure if a guy's out there using a flasher, he's not going to mind showing you how to use one and how he's fishing and how he's catching fish. I know I always stop what I'm doing to show other people what to do, and I know I'm not the only one out there doing that. I know I can imagine this gentleman here would probably pass it along and share the successes he's had with other people on the ice as well.
Yep, I have.
That's how it happened to me 10 years ago. It happened to him. I know it's going to happen to many other people. But thank you, you guys. If you have any questions, I'll be here all day.